Welcome everyone. I'm joined today by Victoria Aslanian, CEO of Golden Grape ArmAs. ArmAs is one of Armenia's leading wineries with state-of-the-art vineyards producing indigenous, high-quality Armenian wines. Victoria, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So to start, can you just tell us briefly about yourself, about your family, and about ArmAs? What exactly do you do?
Okay, well, I was born in Yerevan. I moved to Los Angeles when I was 8, and I lived mainly in Los Angeles and also a little bit in San Francisco while I was getting my bachelor's at UC Berkeley, where I studied art history. Honestly, I never saw myself living in Armenia, though I love to visit here. I thought that I'd have difficulty considering I have somewhat less than conservative views with regard to certain things, especially being a young woman. But the first time that I set foot at ArmAs, which was in 2008, my father had already started a year before that, and he was knee-deep in agricultural development in the first phase of our project, which was man versus nature. Immediately, I knew this is where I have to be. And just months later, in 2009, moved here, and the rest was history. Actually, our beginnings at ArmAs are rather romantic because my father decided to do this when he found out he's expecting his first grandchild, my son, who also has the initials of ArmAs, and wanted to plant some seeds and watch them grow and do something, of course, that was going to have an economic and cultural impact on the nation, considering he was going to do something with a massive, massive investment. And I'm not talking just financially, in terms of, spirit, work, dedication, and revitalizing the industry.
And I understand that winemaking runs in your family. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Well, my great-grandfather, the original ArmAs, Victoria Aslanian, was the first winemaker in our family, though he was the village winemaker, so a very, very different capacity. So as much as our country is having a renaissance of Armenian wine, our family is also having a revival of legacy.
That's wonderful. So I'm glad that you mentioned this renaissance of Armenian wine because I'm curious about where you see Armenia's wine industry going. Armenia, of course, is a small country with limited capacity for production. So I'm wondering, do you see Armenia more as a niche producer? Is there a capacity for mass producing? What is Armenia's competitive advantage in winemaking?
We have so many competitive advantages. Aside from marketing budget, it's all competitive advantages. In terms of winemaking or the story in wine, we couldn't have made up a better story than the one that we have. First and foremost, the terroir. The terroir is the climatic conditions of growing grapes for fine wine. So Armenia is located on the 45th parallel on the globe. It's considered the magic of the 45th because of the way the sun rays hit the vines. We have high elevation at ArmAs, for instance, anywhere between 1,100 to 1,350 meters above sea level. So it's this gorgeous undulating terrain. Warm, cold winters, warm summers, cool summer nights, which is excellent for the maturation of the grapes and when it rests and ripens and pH, acid balance, etc., as well as volcanic soil, like very rich in minerals, limestone. So I always make the comparison of diamonds. It's very difficult to cultivate, but the more difficult, the more brilliant. And so as such with the grapes. We also have native grape varieties, some of the most ancient grapes that are still being used today. And that thrive in the soil. In fact, there's much evidence that suggests that many of the European varieties all originated here. There certainly is evidence that shows that the Vitis vinifera grape, which is the common wine grape that's used all over the world today, and the wild grape all originated here. So it's not coincidental that we have the biblical legend of Mount Ararat as well. In Genesis 9:20, Noah plants the first vines because this is where grapes were meant to thrive. And coincidentally, we also have the oak trees for oak barrels to match. So it's truly God-given, this idyllic terroir of the vine. And we used to have a very, very rich wine trade, but not only wine culture, wine trade in ancient times. And you even have Greek historians like Herodotus, Strabo, Xenophon who speak of this culture. And we were very active on the Silk Route. So we used to export to China way back in the day. And that's exactly why we're calling it a renaissance. Because with this modern know-how, massive investment, using the best of what nature has given us, we truly, truly are revitalizing the industry and making a name for ourselves. So 1, terroir, 2, native grape varieties, and now, as we're coupling it with tourism, Armenia has the opportunity to have this industry be its brand, its country brand, because we already have the infrastructure for it. And we certainly have that hospitality, which is also a competitive advantage, fine wines. It's just a matter of people discovering us, and also all of that at a fraction of the price.
Right. Well, I'm glad that you bring up people discovering Armenian wine, because I also wanted to ask about what your experience has been as an ambassador for Armenian wine, really. Of course, many Armenians know just how special Armenian wine is, but I'd imagine that many outsiders are not aware of exactly the things you were just saying about the history of winemaking here. So what has that experience been like working with international buyers?
Initially, it was somewhat disheartening, I will say, but not only with international buyers, with Armenians as well, because they hadn't tried it and they weren't sure, and they needed a little bit of convincing, as it were, as well as we had to have some street credibility. And we got that through countless awards and accolades, by being recognized by some of the most reputable wine journalists, for instance, and connoisseurs, and being featured in some of the most reputable publications, including, for instance, ArmAs was featured in Foreign Affairs magazine, Forbes, LA Times, Wine Enthusiast, among many, many others. And some of our wines were recognized as some of the best in the world, very, very highly rated. Also, over the past decade and a half, we've had some of the best winemakers that have either worked here or consulted, including ours, Emilio Del Medico, but as well, Michel Roland as well, Paul Hobbs, among many, many others. So it had to go hand in hand with, of course, recognizability. Some people, unfortunately, didn't even know where Armenia was, let alone that we make wine, but you know, that's upon us. We need to inform, excite, educate, and give people a chance to try the wines. Once they do, it truly does speak for itself. And also, I would say that most of our wines, most of our fine wines, really excel in terms of price quality. And we've done that purposefully. We have very much underpriced them so that it does excel for the foreign buyer. And I will say that I've noticed, you know, everyone is always looking for something new. And we're something new from somewhere very, very old. You know, there's old world wines and new world wines, but we are in the epicenter of the historic world of wine. So people feel like it's a discovery. I always tell them this is what's missing from your wine list, and it truly is. And it's only a matter of time. And considering the strides that we've made, all of us in our own efforts, by our own efforts, it's beyond commendable, the recognition that we already have today. In terms of moving forward, production, niche market, or bulk wines or whatnot, certainly at this point niche. In the future, perhaps we might be able to compete on the bulk wine market, perhaps not, but I will say, you know, only a fraction of our arable land is cultivated. So once there is the demand, we will supply. Because what we did at ArmAs, we created for something for which there was no market demand. So it's not a very business-like move, but we've created the market and we continue to create that. And it's very exciting. And I hope that every Armenian will be a walking ambassador, proudly so.
Absolutely. And you also mentioned that you were born here in Yerevan and then spent a good part of your life in California. So I'm wondering, having come back here, having started ArmAs and turning it into this wonderful business that we see today, what advice do you have for Armenians outside of Armenia who are looking to start businesses here or invest here or just contribute in some way?
Now is the time. I certainly I preach to all of my friends and all of those that I know, coming from experience with the difficult and the positive aspects, especially for Armenians. You know, every business environment has their difficulties and their challenges, whether it's a landlocked country or high prices or high costs for production or human resources or whatnot. I will say certainly one of the most competitive advantages that we have are our human resources. Very, very bright individuals who just need the opportunity and training. If they're not ready for a certain profession, you give them the opportunity, you train them, they will be assets. And again, at a fraction of the price. And in any business environment, of course, you're going to have difficulties and challenges. but why not have it in your motherland? I mean, I personally, I make the comparison, you know how native grape varieties thrive in their native terroir? My spirit thrives in my soil. And in fact, I will share with you, just a couple of years ago, I temporarily moved back to Los Angeles, predominantly there because we opened our own import distribution company there. So we were creating the market. And while, yes, business-wise, huge market, incomparable market, obviously so. But imagine even having lived most of my life there, 18 years or whatnot. After living here for 12 years, I could not adjust. I could not adjust in living in Los Angeles. So as soon as I did whatever I absolutely had to do, I moved back and I couldn't be happier.
Oh, that's great to hear. I'm wondering too if you could talk about being a woman business owner in Armenia, because unfortunately business in Armenia, like in many other countries, remains male dominated. So what has that experience been like? And again, what advice do you have for women who are watching this who would like to follow the path that you have made?
Well, sometimes my breasts get in the way. I use this phrase specifically and in jest, of course, because I did a TEDx speech called Breasts Guiding Your Navigation, where I commented very much about the differences of being not just a woman businesswoman, but generally speaking, a woman in our culture. Some things, of course, are very comical. Some things are disheartening. But, there are worse things. Just like you're going to have certain advantages or not, this is something we need to work through. Keep your eye on the ball, because at the end of the day, for instance, no one knows when they're purchasing wine, most people, especially internationally, whether this wine was created by a woman, a man, or what. They know if they like the wine, if this is something that they want. So create the best product or service. All of those disheartening things, and believe me, there have been many, try to chalk it up to humor and be the change. Create an environment, hire women, be the change. And be a successful businesswoman, of course. That's one of the best ways that you change these ridiculous stereotypes. Ridiculous stereotypes at times. But, and I will say one more thing. I mean, for me, it's really funny how when some men want to compliment me, the best compliment that they can think of is, you're a manly woman. I will say, no, I'm a womanly woman. I just happen to be good at what I do.
Well, on that note, Victoria, thank you again very much for taking the time to come to us today. We very much appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.